can someone be saved by kitchen creativity, and how might that affect you? That's the topic that we're going to address today on Flourishment. I'm your host, Tina Yeager, and today I have a brand new guest for you. Her name is Fallon Lee. She's a member of Samaritan Ministries, and from her own personal health struggle and that of her son, she was driven to seek out healing through food, and that prompted her to write an amazing new cookbook. Welcome, Fallon. I am so thrilled to get into this amazing topic with you today.
Thank you, Tina. I'm so glad to be here.
Let's turn to your personal story and the story that you have that started with noticing your child needed something different than what he was getting from the medical system, from all the other things that you tried. As a parent, that is a place of panic.
It is. That was one of the darkest years of my life, in that the Lord showed up in such a sweet way. And now that I'm removed from it, now so many years ahead, I can look back and I can see the Lord's provision. I can see the mission that he was building in me and in my son. And now it's not an exaggeration to say I get the gift of ministering to thousands of women because of my son's sickness. And that's something that I will never take for granted. I will never get over that the Lord took something that was broken and he redeemed it and he restored it. And now I get to share this story with women. And I get that doesn't always happen. We don't always get to see that redemptive moment and trace the line and trace his hand. But the Lord was kind enough to give that to me, that I get to look back and look at the suffering that we walked through. And today get to see, myself and my son walking in vibrancy. And it's such a huge, beautiful thing that I get to walk alongside other women and families in this too.
As you went through the process of experimenting with foods that would be healing and healthy for you and for your son, how did you begin to even identify the changes that you need to make? And how can we do that?
I started on such a restrictive road. And that's one thing that I love to talk about because I think it's easy to, the sort of the entryway into this idea of healing through food. People often start gluten-free, dairy-free, and then eventually you sort of find the roadmaps of things like paleo or Whole30, and you cut maybe grains or nuts or whatever it may be. And for me, it was really easy to just go further and further down that rabbit hole and continue to cut food. And so people that have followed on my site and story for a while have heard me reference often that there was a season where I was only eating about 7 to 10 foods because I had gotten so far into this idea of cutting and restriction, and that the more food that I took out, the better I was going to feel, that I eventually whittled down to so few things that I was miserable and I wasn't healthy and I wasn't thriving. And so I say that to say, I think it's easy when you find this world of healing through food to go directly to those very restrictive styles of eating. They do bring short-term healing. I believe that. I think when you go from a standard American diet and then start eating whole food, you're going to feel better, absolutely. But eventually the restriction catches up. And so after years of, again, the restriction, the cutting down, something sort of awoke in me that I think was the Holy Spirit's kindness to show me that food was meant to be this gift and this tool, and was not something that was supposed to be an enemy or feared. Again, real whole food, that is. I have to put parameters around when I say food. I certainly don't mean, these processed sort of modern man-made foods, but the foods that God created for us. And so I think for someone starting out, just a whole foods baseline is a beautiful thing to start with, because I do think we can get lost in the weeds of cutting this, cutting that. Certainly that does need to happen sometimes. I already alluded to even being gluten-free myself. And sometimes there are certain nuances, but I do think when we get into the territory of viewing food as something that needs to be cut, something that's hurting us, then we're developing these neurological pathways that tell us food is our enemy. And so I had to really come out of that myself. And I like to encourage women to start from a more freeing pursuit of food instead of going down that same path that I walked, where everything was an enemy, everything needed to be cut out. And I think I'm thankful for that road so that I am on sort of the other side and can help point women toward a different way, because I don't think our relationship with food has to be like that.
I think we go back and forth between two extremes of food being our enemy and food being our God. I mean, being
Hmm.
our comfort place and doing all the things that really God needs to do. It's what entertains us. It's what makes us feel better. We turn to it for things that are emotional in nature and healing. And that's not what food is meant to do. And usually when we do
Hmm.
that, those are the wrong foods that we're choosing when we do
Yes.
those things. How can we break up with our bad ideas about food?
Yeah, I think that starting with the grace for yourself to use the resources that you have, because again, I know that not every family can just turn around and go fully organic and buy everything local and buy everything fresh. I get that that's not the reality for everyone. I think doing the little things that you can will make an impact. And I think the more we fall in love with real food, the more we can separate from these dogmatic ideas. And so I think we do have to sort of put blinders up almost to anybody who is promoting some sort of black and white rules and this food is always bad. Again, this real food is always bad, or, don't eat dairy and don't eat insert whatever. There's all of these people sort of promoting this idea that a real food is sort of out to get you. And so I think we have to walk in wisdom and go, is this message for me? Is this nuanced enough to sit with me? Or do I feel like the message I'm listening to is just dogmatic? And I think the further we get away from those messages that put us into categories and want to label food as bad and good, the further we get away from that, the easier it is to walk in freedom around food. And like you said, Tina, not turn to it as a crutch, but to use it in a nourishing, supportive way that still can be enjoyed. I think there's a beautiful balance in the middle of not turning to food as an idol or a savior, not turning to food as an enemy, but knowing that God gave it as a gift. I tell my kids often, God didn't have to create us to need food, and he didn't have to create good food. He did that because he's good and because he's kind and because it's just an extra common grace that we get, that food is good and it's meant to be nourishing, and gathering around a table is a beautiful thing. It's communal. And so I think the more we see food in this light of it brings us together, it nourishes our body, the easier it is to step away from those very black and white ideas.
As a parent, how do you get kids to embrace healing food, healthy food, rather than the processed foods that are so readily available at their friend's house, at their school, and everywhere that they turn?
We have such a unique scenario in my home because my middle son, I think I mentioned, is actively healing from a lot of allergies. And so, in a way, we've had these parameters put up that we can't break outside of. And so, my kids have known real whole food their entire life, almost out of necessity. And I've been really thankful for that. I'm thankful that they have known little else, because I do think that as their palate is developing, as they're growing, those early years are so formational. And so I think that if we introduce good, nourishing things, our kids are going to enjoy those things. And obviously, my kids are a little bit of a unique scenario, because I do think we have so many options these days that even a very health conscious parent is going to face opportunities for packaged and processed and, like you said, friends' houses and birthday parties. But my kids, I just have to laugh. I'll make something homemade for them, and they'll have had something maybe packaged as a one off the week before. And they're like, Mommy, this is so much better than the other version. And I think that's a training thing. I think that that's almost a habitual response to eating good, nourishing food, is that your body realizes that it actually is better. It does taste better. And I, of course, was raised on the most processed food, just like the rest of my generation. And even now, my husband and I often comment on, going and getting a candy bar. It doesn't even hardly sound good anymore, because we know what it tastes like and feels like to actually eat real nourishing food. And it's just such a difference. So I think creating those habits in your kids will go a long way. And then hopefully we'll carry them into their own choices into adulthood.
I know that you have more tips and recipes available on your website, through your newsletter, and in the Tots cookbook. So, how can people stay connected with you and access all of the amazing wealth of resources that you have to offer?
Thank you for that. My website is fallonstable.com. and it is user friendly. Everything's laid out. You can get all of my digital books on there, including my Tots cookbook. And I have some other really fun recipe books. I have a Southern style, which as a Georgia girl, I feel like, well, I'm in Texas. So of course I had to create a Southern style nourishing cookbook. And I have meal plans that can help women, especially get started on eating enough. We live in the day and age of diet culture. And so a lot of women need to eat a bit more. And so I love to walk women through that journey. And then I have a batch cookbook, which is all about bulk prepping. It was created with the postpartum mom in mind who wants those nourishing soups and casseroles ready to go for when baby's here. But it is certainly a multifaceted book. I love it for hosting. Those meals when you have company and you're like, what am I going to make to please a crowd? This is the book that was meant for that. So on my site, all of that can be downloaded in a split second. And that's my favorite way to connect with people. Again, is there an email, and Fallon Dene is my social tag.
And as a member of Samaritan Ministries, that was part of your healing journey. How can people access even more health benefits by connecting with them?
Absolutely. I love that Samaritan has just given us such freedom in our medical and wellness journey. As someone who had a sick son, we have certainly been in and out of the medical system for a long time. And I do think being a Samaritan member has really solidified for us that this journey to find holistic healing is worth it. And this journey to be in community and sharing burdens with other believers, which is the Samaritan model. You're sending your shares directly to a family versus going on to, a hospital site to pay the bill. And I love the personal touch of getting to connect with other believers, pray for them. We got such sweet handwritten notes and prayers in the various times that my son has been hospitalized for this, that, or the other. And so I do love that it just so aligns with my heart to be involved in a ministry versus some profit driven corporation where I'm not connecting with people and they don't actually really care about the scenario I'm walking through. Whereas Samaritan is just such a vastly different experience that feels personal, biblical, and just really beautiful to be a part of.
I hope that all of you listening were informed and inspired to seek healing through food. And of course, I also hope that you will come back for the next episode of Flourishment.